Hello, Armored Pants here, and I have another video for you. This is a review of the new Tier 9 American Heavy, the M5 Yo. And we're getting here after we've done the 7 and 8 already. We're getting here after a couple of detours where we looked at, some the T25AT and some other videos. Now, these guys, Roger, of course you do, from Star Wars, right? And you're probably thinking, Armored, why are you showing me this? And here's the head of the droid. Well, actually, there's a reason I'm showing you this, right? Because when I was reviewing this tank and when I started playing it, right, and I hadn't seen it when it was launched because, I only got back into doing the videos there a little while ago, right? But when I was looking at its head, and here we have a detached sever head, probably post-Jedi encounter head, I was kind of thinking, this fucking reminds me of this tank, right? It really does, right? It looks exactly like one of the fucking battle droids from Star Wars. Now you've seen it, you probably won't be able to unsee it. Now, the other thing is, there's definitely, this tank does not have the engine in the turret like the Tier 7. I mean, you'd fit fuck all into the turret of this thing. Actually kind of reminds me of a girl I went out with when I was in college, right? So, she was quite a nice girl, and she had really nice hair, pretty big hair, actually. But I remember, when we were going out, after a few dates, we started getting a little bit intimate, and I put my hand into her hair to try to feel her head, the back of her head, and my hand just kept going, like fucking Indiana Jones at Temple of Doom when he's looking for that fucking lock when they're in that room that's being crushed. Just kept pushing on through fucking hair. I know Indiana Jones with spiderwebs. Then eventually I hit skull, and her fucking head was tiny. I'd forgotten about that until I realised that, and the big hair was to hide the small head until I encountered this tank here, with its tiny fucking head, Her head was so small, that, she looked like, I was keeping on the Indiana Jones themes, Balok from Raiders of the Lost Ark, post-opening the Ark of the Covenant, Fucking head just shrunk down. But unlike him, she did have very nice hair afterwards, after that encounter. Anyway, I digress. Let's have a look at the tech spec of this tank. Now, this tank, I don't really like it, and I don't think it's particularly good either, right? Because of its DPM mainly, right? So it has 3 guns, 2 105mm autoloaders, and the top gun is 120mm autoloader. Now, I'm going to review here the 120mm top gun, but in the gameplay, I'm going to use 105mm. In terms of provisions, I'd run Coke, case of Coke, and enhanced fuel, max out your specs. I'd run calibrated shells, supercharged and refined gun on this. And the reason is because it's an autoloader, and the difference that it makes in terms of the magazine reload if you run calibrated shells versus gun rounds, fuck all. It's 25.7 versus 25.2. You gotta wait that long. I mean, literally, it's like waiting for a fucking bus. I've had shits that have fucking been faster than fucking the magazine reload in this thing. This is where the DPM is so shit, right? Because, okay, there's 1.7 seconds reload between the magazine, but almost 26-second reload. Fuck off, Wargaming. What the fuck? You can't brawl in this thing. If you get into a brawl in this thing with something like an Object 140, 5.5 second, you're just gonna pummel the fucking shit out of you. And the other thing about it is, right, your ability to fire influences your ability to affect the game. And if you can only fire twice every 30 odd seconds, you're having very little impact on the game. So therefore, the inference you draw from that is that this tank is not an influential tank on the game, and therefore, in my opinion, not a good tank. Does that mean that you can't play well with it? No, of course not. And we're going to have a look at the mastery game, we look at the gameplay. Of course you can. But it's just not a good tank, right? Its muzzle velocity is actually decent, it's 1525 meters per second with AP, that drops to 1387 meters per second with heat and HE. Its gun handling index then is 14.4. I calculated gun handling index with the lower velocity shells. It's actually only 13k, but still good. Its maneuverability, its mobility index is 2.6, which is crap, and it only does 32 kilometers an hour, and its part rate ratio is pretty bad, so that's crap, right? But if you use engine accelerator as one of your consumables, when you use that, it goes up to 3.26, which is actually decent. As we said, a basic guideline is anything for a heavy over 3, and the mobility index means it's good. You can see here that you can side scrape in this tank. It's really small, big hair type head turret, means it's very difficult to paint, although this bit on the top here that we're looking at now is vulnerable. it also has this weird head type thing, which is small, tiny, but kind of elongated. Maybe the engine is in there. Do you know what? I didn't even fucking check, to be honest with you. But the armor on the front is actually quite decent. We're going to have a look at the armor front on, right? But you know, forget about engine placement, forget about the armor. But let's have a look at the armor here front. You can see if your top tier, the armor front on is decent. It's also very narrow, very difficult to hit. It's very small target, which is always good. And even up at tier 10, you still got a bit of frontal armor. But forget about that, leaving that aside, right? The problem with this tank is its gun system, and the fact that you have so little impact on the game, and that you've got 2 shots that will give you burst damage from 900 if you use AP up to 1030 if you use HE, 780 if you use heat, right? Also small burst damage, right? There's only 2 shells in the magazine as well, whereas most comparable tanks have 3 shells in the magazine. So again, you're on to a loser here as well, right? You know, it's kind of the Miami Dolphins of fucking tanks, this thing, right? And it's a long time since Dan Marino was fucking driving this thing. You know, in terms of pen, you get 258 millimeters with AP, 352 with heat, 66 with HE if you run the calibrated shells, which I recommend you do because you don't lose anything in terms of the magazine reload. You know, I mean, literally you could die waiting for this fucking thing to reload. Quite literally in the game and figuratively outside of the game in real life. So, you know, for that reason, I don't think this tank is particularly good, right? Because, you know, one of my basic tenets of the game is that your ability to, how often you can fire, basically is a very good indicator or barometer of how you can influence the game. And if you can fire basically as infrequently as this, then you are, you know, you're not going to be able to influence the game, right? I mean, it's common sense. You know, Genghis Khan didn't father 400 kids by firing infrequently. No, this guy was firing constantly, and he wasn't firing blanks either, right? By the way, they do estimate that 1% of the total world's population is directly descended from Genghis Khan. Another thing, interesting thing about business fuck all to do with this tank, by the way, but just I always think it's an interesting fact that if Genghis Khan hadn't lived, there'd be an extra billion people on the planet now. Yeah, that's how many people he killed. If you extrapolate forward the amount of people that he killed, I mean, not personally, obviously his army, you know, I mean, yeah, he did kill quite a few people himself, but you know, if you extrapolate that forward, it'd be a billion people now. So, you know, given that we've got overpopulation, the planet probably needed more Genghis Khans in the past, but you know, that's probably not a politically very correct view to have. But again, I digress. So I am conscious of the fact, by the way, we covered off quite a lot in this video so far. You know, girls with small heads who use big hair to hide it. I guess guys could do that too, just guys with small heads as well, right? You know, and small heads, but not a lot in them actually. You just have to read the comments on any social media to see that that's actually the case. So we covered off that. We covered off Indiana Jones, 2 of the movies in the trilogy. It's a quadrilogy now, isn't it? Actually, read or loud, they're actually going to make another one, right?
Surrender, Jedi.
It was like Indiana Jones and the fucking retirement home. But so what the fuck was I talking about? Oh yeah, so this tank, yeah. So look, this tank, it's just meh at the best, right? And also you're going to see with the way and it's obvious that this tank is not good, right? Because this is a really cheap mastery badge, right? There's one, he's not AFK, I don't know if he's hiding or whatever. At the end you'll see that BC is what the fuck he's doing. But you know, this is a very cheap mastery badge, right? I don't have to do too much to get it. And I think that, you know, that's also a very good indicator of whether a tank is good or not, because if a tank is good and lots of good players are going to be doing lots of high XP, and therefore to get 99, to be better than 99% of them, you have to do a lot of good stuff in the game and get a lot of XP, which you don't with this tank, right? You know, so in that way it's good. You can get a mastery badge relatively easy, because if you do pretty okay in the game, because you know, it's the base XP is not that high. So I think I said there was 2 shells in the magazine. You can clearly see there's 3. But you know, I don't know. Look, just doing the. I mean, I have I have the gun here with I have the gun system with 3 magazines and 3 shells, and I got 2.6 second reload between the shells. Look, I mean, this thing, you can have fun or whatever, but I just don't think it's good. I don't see something that has such a long magazine reload. It has, you know, okay gun handling, but it's not great, so you can easily miss some shots in it, and then you're kind of fucked, right? I mean, it is good at this, it's good for clearing off tanks, you know, but then it's not any better than any other auto loader, right? But I just think, you know, if you think that you're going to be coming up against AMX 5120, T54, I mean T54, the American one with the autoloader system, and T57, the American Tier 10, or the AMX 50B, other autoloaders, plus the BC, which is not a loader, and then you've got, you know, auto reloaders like the Prog and the Standard. And then you've got standard firing systems like on the T22, Object 140, T62A. All of those things are gonna DPM the shit out of you and pound your ass into the fucking ground, right? Plus, you can't even really get out of trouble because the thing is pretty slow and it's got poor power to weight ratio. We said that without using engine accelerator, its standard mobility is 2.6, so it's pretty bad. So also things like an IS4, IS7, IS8 are all far more maneuverable than you, and not to mention the M103, the T11 OE5. All these heavies, which you're going to be coming up against when you play Tier 9, are far more maneuverable than you. So for that reason, you're going to get into all sorts of trouble in this thing, and you're not be able to get out of it because you can't fire your way out of it and you can't run away. So, you know, it's fight or flight, and in this you can't really do either, right? So anyway, guys, that's just my opinion, you know. I mean, you saw there that you can have decent game in this tank, right? You see there,
Roger.
mastery badge delivered, and the base XP is just over 1400. So normally for Tier 9 you'd be looking at 1500 base XP to get a mastery badge. So again, going back to the fact that this tank's not a particularly good tank, I think. And it kind of really doesn't make sense to me why Wargaming launched this, or what's supposed to be attractive about it. Certainly not the way it looks, right? It looks fucking awful. It's such a weird looking fucking thing. But it's also not, doesn't have anything really particularly going for it, right? It's not like, you know, when they other lines that they've launched with auto loaders or the European lines or anything like that. There's nothing here that would make me want to grind this. I'm grinding it so I can do the review, but that's it. You know, but then Wargaming do lots of things that don't make sense, like fucking over their customer base, a loyal customer base, right? So there you go. C'est la vie. Anyway, guys, I hope you found this useful. I hope you found it enjoyable. And if not, send me an email, strongly worded email. So cheers much. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And now I guess all that remains for me to say is, as always, thanks for watching and pants off. Roger, roger.
Roger.